Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4.
It's going in now. That's so much fun, it ought to be illegal.
I think it might be the
And it probably is. Hey, kids, what time is it?
Time for Gezintahait.
It is time for Gezintahait. And the story tonight is called A Walk in Rostov. Once, the Rebbe Rashab went for a walk with his son, Yosef Yitzchak. On that walk, the Rebbe Rashab explained a very deep and complicated godly topic to his son. At one point, the Rebbe, the Rashab, stopped walking. His son was so focused on the godly topic, he didn't notice his father stopped and he kept walking. The Rebbe Rashab called his son by name. He said, Yosef Yitzchak. So his son quickly returned to his father. The Rebbe Rashab then explained the very deep wisdom to his son. He explained the difference between human intellect and how it understands godliness and godly intellect. Human intellect, the Rebbe said, starts with understanding and finally reaches a level of faith in God because of finally the realization that human intellect is limited. Godly intellect, on the other hand, starts with faith and internalizes that faith through the intellect. By divine providence, the house in front of which the Rebbe Rashab stopped would later become the local headquarters of the GPU, the secret police. And when it became the headquarters of the GPU, the son became the Rebbe, and he was summoned to that house on several occasions for questions. During one of those interrogations, they asked him, what's the difference between human intellect and godly intellect? And he was able to explain the difference. So you see that the Rebbe Rashab is a Rebbe, so everything he does unfolds into a long thought. And this encapsulates the idea a word from a Rebbe can have an effect many years later. In a similar story, the previous Rebbe said that his father, the Rebbe Rashab, once posed a question to his father, the Rebbe Marash. The Rebbe Marash used two different Yiddish terms to describe delivering a Hasidic discourse. Sometimes he called it Reden Hasidus, which we can translate as speaking Hasidus, and other times he used the term Zagen Hasidus, saying Hasidus. So there was two different terms he used about delivering a Hasidic discourse. The Rebbe Rashab asked his father to explain what the difference is when he says it's Reden Hasidus and between Zagen Hasidus. Rebbe Marash answered, Reden Hasidus applied when those hearing the explanation were appropriate vessels to understand and utilize the teaching. Okay, Hirsch?
Mm-hmm.
Reden Hasidus, who was listening, was able to use what the Rebbe said. Zagen Hasidus, on the other hand, applied to those who were not a fitting vessel to understand and utilize the teaching. Nevertheless, the Torah lesson would eventually have its effect on them, or on their children, or even on their grandchildren. Our Rebbe says we can learn two things from this answer. One, how precise and exact is every move and expression of a Rebbe in general, and everything a Rebbe tells a person. Two, the greatness of Zagen Hasidus by a Rebbe, even though at the time of the teaching, when the person hears it, it apparently is not internalized or even grasped externally by the listener. But we have to say it is received and internalized. The proof is that years later, even generations later, the person who heard, or his son, or daughter, or even his grandchildren, will finally be affected by that teaching. The reason is that the Rebbe's Torah is not just an ordinary piece of information that goes in one ear and out the other, like material that passes through a funnel as described in Pirkei Avos. Hang on, I'm sure I got the rest of it here someplace. Yeah. Rather, when a Rebbe delivers a Hasidic discourse or talks to someone, it represents a godly idea that becomes essentially embedded in the one who hears it, and it dwells within that person. Regarding the Torah, the Navi Yirmiyahu states, "Is not my word like fire?" Hashem says, "My word is like fire." Just as fire purifies, the Rebbe's words not only purify and clarify the subject, but they purify and clarify the listener. Yet sometimes its effect is only apparent years or generations later. We want Mashiach now.
Man, that's right.
Imagine what it is to have a Rebbe. He can implant a new godliness that will finally be revealed. You guys have a niggin for us?
Yeah, we was thinking, Bezalel, since this week is going to be the 20th of Av, the day of the passing, the outside of the Rebbe's father, Rabbi Yitzchak. We thought maybe we would do Rabbi Yitzchak's Sakopis niggin.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah. Now we give us the evening. Do we start on the? Okay, here we
says in places that Hasidus explains the Kabbalah in letters of Hasidus. And Reb Leivik explains the Hasidus in letters of Kabbalah. Now, we already went over this, what I'm going to tell you a few times. However, going over and over the explanation allows a person to reach the source of that ability to go over and over it, and that source is the inner point of the heart, which is the highest level in the person. It is the simple pleasure in godliness. So the source of going over the explanation is rooted in the simple pleasure that the soul has in being connected with God. Now, we're not trying to teach one how to do what's called the meditation, the Hasidic meditation, but we want to use it as a tool with which to become familiar with some important concepts in Chabad Hasid. And particularly for the seniors, that's what Gimel Ella suggested, that we do this exercise in order that the seniors can not only sharpen their minds, but they could bring godly light into their minds.
Yeah, when I turned 3,000 years old, I started asking for discounts,
Oh, you get a senior discount?
Yeah, I told them I'm 3,000 now. Give me a discount. What's wrong with you?
So what did they tell you? Okay, you're only 2,890.
Yeah, they told me you didn't know. Only 100 years ago, they moved it up from 3,000 to 3,100. I was okay.
Besides the fact, he's not telling his real age. He's really 5,000. Now, by learning how a person's mind works, we'll be able to relate to the supernal man on the throne that the prophet sees. Like the prophet sees a guy on the throne who tells him the prophecy, and since he sees a man on the throne, and it says that Hashem created us in his image, so also we have all the attributes of that godly man on the throne. In learning mathematics, it's first necessary to know that there are 10 numbers in a progressive chronology. Right, Gimel Aleph?
That's right.
Gimel is number 3. It comes after 2 and before 4.
Right.
In geography, there are 4 directions. Without these axiomatic postulates, it's impossible to understand the subject under study, or at least very difficult, until these axioms are grasped and fixed in the mind. So too, in the study of Hasidus, there are 10 spheros and 4 worlds. It's worthwhile to take the time to integrate them into our knowledge base. Gimel Aleph, have you done that? You know?
Yeah, I'm integrating it into my knowledge base.
You know that there's 4 worlds?
Yeah, I know the 4 worlds.
What are the 4 worlds?
They are Atzilus. This is the world of emanation.
Yeah.
Right, and this is different. This is a different. It's not the same like Galotry, because it's completely like a bottle. It's completely godly. It's not separated at all.
Right.
Where in the 3 worlds, each one, the lower the world, the more so they have some sort of feeling of a being of self that's outside of God.
Right. So number 1, they're limited, and number 2, they feel that they exist.
Yeah, and that's Bria, the world of creation, Yetzirah, the world of formation, Asiya, the world of action. That's the idea.
Very good. Atzilus, the world of emanation, differs from the 3 lower worlds, like the Gimel Aleph just told us. Why? Because Atzilus embodies godliness, while the 3 lower worlds feel separate from Hashem. Bria is the world called creation, the Yisir is the world called formation, and the Sia is the world of action. And there are 10 attributes. 4 worlds, Atzilus, Bria, Yisir, and Sia. And there are 10 attributes. The first 3 are Chabad, Chachma, Bina, and Das. Wisdom, understanding, and knowledge.
Right, that's called the intellect. Yeah, the 3
And
intellects.
the lower 7 are the emotion attributes. Kindness, strictness, mercy, victory, glory, and foundation. And finally, kingship, royalty. Chagas, kindness, justice, and mercy are the feelings in the heart. While Netzach, Hod, and Yesod, the lower emotion attributes, bring the feelings into revelation through Malchus. In a very rough kind of metaphor, you have the boy who loves the girl, but he's very shy. But through his attribute of victory, he's able to tell her how he feels. So that will be how it comes through the lower attributes, finally into Malchus, which is the letters of speech and thought. You understand, Gamal? Or you forgot about all that already.
Oh, I remember it. Trust me. And after you have a wife for about 2,000 years, you remember it every day.
And by the same and a somewhat connected token, there are 2 metaphors how Hashem dresses himself in order to relate to us.
Yeah.
And in turn, allowing us to relate to him. 2 general metaphors. Number 1, the human image, like that man on the throne. Like the supernal man on the throne in the heavens in the visions of the prophets. And Chassidus explained that even though Hashem has no body, he has no form and no likeness of a body. But when we speak about Hashem's right arm, it's a metaphor for his attribute of kindness. Hashem dresses itself in the attribute of kindness to be able to relate to us. We mentioned the brain of the supernal man. It's a metaphor for how the ungraspable, unknowable one dresses himself in the attribute of divine wisdom. In order that we should be able to connect with divinity, we could connect with godliness, with divinity, and understand how to do his will in making this world a dwelling place for him.
But Salil, is that what it means, that we're a reflection of Hashem down here, that we are made in the form of Hashem, just like he has a chesed and we have a this arm, and he have a gvura and we have a that arm? Something like that?
I think so. That's what it says. From my flesh, I'll see God. And why does he do this? Because he wants us to make this world a dwelling place for him. And in this way, since we have an attribute of kindness and an attribute of intellect, then from my flesh I will know God, because Hashem dresses himself also into 10 attributes. He's very much higher and separate from any kind of attributes, but he dresses himself into these attributes so he can connect with us. So that's the first metaphor of how godliness connects to us. And the second metaphor is the metaphor of names. The name Kel, Aleph Lamed, represents the divine attribute of kindness, while Elohim represents the divine attribute of justice, of Gebura. So if you call to Hashem by a name that indicates wisdom, he emanates wisdom. For example, if one needs a favor, he addresses the one he petitions by saying, "You are such a kind person," because he wants to arouse that person to show kindness, to elicit from that person an attribute of kindness. Hashem is essentially removed and ineffable, but at the same time, he commands us to love and fear him. So how do we love and fear him? How do we have the possibility? Because he dresses himself in these attributes of love and fear. And that begs another question. How can love and fear be commanded? Hashem commands us to love and fear him. But how is it? You either love a person or you don't love him. You can't say to a guy, I love me. But that's what happens. Hashem commands us to love him. How is that possible? Hashem does not ask the impossible. And he provides a device to enable us to achieve love and fear of him. And that device is our power to understand, each to his own ability, the greatness of Hashem. So when you understand the greatness of Hashem, you automatically love and fear him. When one understands God's unity and something of his greatness, his kindness and wisdom, one will automatically love him. To know him. There's a song like that. It's to love,
Yeah,
and I do. And do we have a niggun? Maybe it's time for a niggun.
How about from Gideon? We have
Oh,
So, I kind of have a feeling, when you come to class and you tell the teacher says, bring out your homework. Many of them are suppressible like that. But I think that what I'll do is, there's a song from Shabbat that I happen to really like. It's called Yeshmar Shabbat. It was written by the Ibn Ezra. What it is in a kitzer way, what the halachas of Shabbos are. So give me a second to find it. So I will be using the.
what country was the Ibn Ezra from?
I think Egypt. I'm not sure.
I was thinking.
So.
And how long ago?
This is
1500s,
He's from them. He's one of the Rishon.
I was there,
You knew him?
No, I didn't know him. I just happened to see him in passing a few times. He was a nice guy.
He passed from the ship.
Levi Bass is coming back.
Oh, they wouldn't let you think they would let me into this rankings.
That was before you had a white beard, I guess.
Yeah, not only that, it was I was running around figuring out the lanterns. It was, this lantern is I got. Let me fix the lantern over here. Okay, I was busy behind doing things and fixing things. But I saw he always smiled. He always smiled. He was a nice guy.
And there was
He knew a lot of stuff too.
Yeah, he knew a lot of stuff.
So the tune over I'll be using is indeed not by Ibn Ezra. I'll be using the tune from the Breslover Hasidim.
That works.
Okay.
All right. כי ישמרה שבת כן ישמרני אותי לעומעד בינו וביני כי ישמרה שבת כן ישמרני אותי לעומעד בינו וביני אסור מצור חפץ אסור דרכים גם מדבר בודי בצרכים מדבר שכל אהבתי ברמלכים רגע בתורת כן וצחים בני כי ישמרה שבת כן ישמרני אותי לעומעד גם איתך ויחד עמי, כי אשמרה שבת כן ישמרני, אותי לעולמי אמן ובני, כי אשמרה שבת כן ישמרני, אותי לעולמי אמן ובני.
Hey,
Yeah.
thank you. Nice.
ברוך תהיה.
A special song for Shabbos. This is a minhag we have to do a song of Shabbos by the Gezintahait.
Hey, that's all.
It's a good
Ringing
minhag.
is like Shabbos.
Yeah, because we're waiting for the day that will be all Shabbos.
The commandment to love Hashem through understanding and godliness, in order to love Him, we understand Him in order to love Him, is expressed in the famous commandment. Gimel Aleph, you want to take a shot?
Yeah.
What the commandment is
So,
through which we can
well,
love Him?
Well, the commandment to love Hashem I remember this word for word. Actually, I'm reading it off the screen share here. But it is expressed in the commandment of Shema Yisrael.
Listen,
Hear, O
Israel.
Israel.
Listen actually means to understand. It doesn't mean to hear with your ears just. It means to hear with your inner ears, to understand what's being said. Listen, Israel. Hearing or listening in this context doesn't mean just listening to the words with a physical ear. It means rather to understand what's being said.
Bitzalel, isn't that like, for example, when somebody tells you an idea and you say, I hear you.
I hear
Well,
what
of course, you hear me, you have ears, but yeah, I hear with my inside ear.
Yeah. That rings true.
Oh, sometimes it rings too when my hearing aid is the batteries are low. It rings very true.
As the Rambam teaches, we are to understand that there is a God, that He is the first and continuous cause of everything that exists, and that He is one, essentially, and in His emanations and creation. First, we'll explain the three dynamics of the intellect, called wisdom, Chachma, understanding, Bina, and knowledge, Das, Chabad, Chachma, Bina, and Das. And through that, that's how we're going to be able to internalize godliness through understanding Hashem through our mind, with these three attributes of the mind, called wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. Chachma, wisdom, which is the light of the idea, of the intellectual concept, before it's dressed in words and letters of explanation. It's just an intuitive flash that tells you, hey, here is a godly revelation coming your way. Bina, on the other hand, which is understanding, is how that idea, that intuitive idea, Chachma, is dressed into words and letters of explanation. To understand these two functions of the mind, we'll illustrate with the example of seeing a thing. Wisdom, the Chachma, is like when a person sees something at first glance. He grasps the object of his mind in a general way. Therefore, he's not yet able to describe it to another person in words and letters, because he has no idea of its measurements and details and components. For example, when a person sees a beautiful building for the first time, like you walk into a shul and you go, wow, this place is beautiful. But the reason why it's beautiful, which is the perfect combination of all of its parts, its colors, its measurements, has not yet been understood, because he has not yet measured out the details. Therefore, he can't yet explain this beauty to one who hasn't seen it. So the seeing and realizing of the beauty, that's going to be the Chachma, that's the wisdom. And explaining it in words and letters is the Bina, is the understanding, is the explanation. And how is it that you're able to bring it into words and letters of explanation? By measuring out the details of this thing that you saw. When he measures and distinguishes all its particular details, he will automatically understand the reason for its beauty. The beauty for itself is an essential thing, the idea itself.
In other words, even if he can't explain it, he can still know it's beautiful.
Right.
And that's Chachma.
Yes.
And then he sits and says, wait, let me think about it. Why is it so beautiful? Then he needs to bring up Bina.
You can bring it into words and letters, exactly. The building has myriad palatial rooms. Its size is huge, but its placement in the landscape makes it appear as a jewel. Its tiles are amazing in color and design, and its windows and turrets are endlessly fascinating, etc. So having realized the details of the architecture, you will now be able to explain to another person in words and letters why the building is beautiful. He's not going to be able to communicate the actual beauty of the building. He'll just be able to communicate why the building is beautiful. And that's called Bina, understanding. But when he first sees the building, even though he realizes the essence of beauty, when he sees it, he realizes it's beautiful, higher than explanation of why it's beautiful, he's only experiencing it in a general way, higher than words and letters. Therefore, he will not be able to explain why it's beautiful to another person, because it's higher than being dressed in words and letters. And the realization of the essence of the beauty, this Chachma, when he first sees the building, illustrates the intellectual level of wisdom, Chachma. The idea itself, higher than words and letters of explanation. What I call the eureka moment. Oh, I got something here. But the understanding of the reason for its beauty, why it's beautiful, is not the essence of the beauty, but only the explanation of why it's beautiful. And this explanation then is a garment for the essence of the beauty. The Bina, the explanation, is a garment for the Chachma, for the idea itself, which the idea is dressed in. The same way that any explanation of an idea is only a garment through which to communicate the idea, but it's not the essence of
so you mean
the
like
idea.
So you mean like, for example, you can explain it, but when you're explaining it's just the voids, it's not the actual building, so it's not the real realization of the building, it's just like an outside thing that you're using to,
Yeah, like a garment, like
like a clothing is not part of the person.
I'm thinking that when the messenger of the king comes to town and he's dressed in fancy clothes with a ribbon, with a badge, it's not the king himself. It's not even what the king wants. However, he becomes the garment to be able to communicate what the king wants. But it's not the idea like the king has it to himself.
Right.
Now, this why of the beauty, why is it beautiful, this explanation, is the understanding of why the building is beautiful. Why? Through distinguishing its particular details, by measuring out what it's made of. It becomes a garment for the essence of the beauty. And that essence of the beauty is Chachma's wisdom. And the explanation of why the building is beautiful is a garment that communicates an understanding of the essence of beauty in words and letters, which illustrates the intellectual dynamic of being of understanding. The example of the building describes Chachma and Bina in the realm of the physical world of action. The metaphor is a building. A building is something that exists in the physical world. Now we're going to explain Chachma and Bina on a higher level of how they exist in the world of good and bad, the world of ethics.
So in other words, first you were talking about how it deals with the physical.
Right.
Now we're going to talk about a slightly more
Now we're going to
higher
give
idea.
a more ethereal explanation.
Okay, good.
But maybe we should have a nigga
No,
first.
how about this? Ba ba boo ba boo boo ba ba boo ba boo ba ba boo ba boo boo da ba da ba da.
What's
He knows what I mean.
That's the dabba dabba do, nigga. That's what I call hot mercy, have mercy.
Yeah, that's some great stuff right there.
Have mercy. Next.
That's like having a pancake for breakfast and then putting a waffle on top of it and then another pancake on top of that.
Next, to understand these two levels of Chachma and Bina as they connect and relate to expressing emotions, meaning how we measure out in our intellect how we should feel or act if faced with a certain situation. So it's a measuring out in the intellect. It's not an actual feeling yet, but it's a measuring out of how I should feel if I encounter this thing. Like, should I be afraid or happy when I encounter it? Or is this thing kosher or not kosher? Or should I do a specific action if I encounter a certain situation or not? And these examples are all in the realm of intellect. They're not feelings yet. But it's intellect that pertains to emotion. And it's called the seichel of the midos.
So what this means, like for example, when the lion is there, but it's not a fear yet, it's like the intellectual realization, this is dangerous and I should be afraid.
Right. In other words, before you see the lion, you realize through your intellect that it's a dangerous thing to be. So then when you see the lion, now you're afraid of it. Some kind of a deal like that. The way I explain it, for example, a car weighs 5,000 pounds and it can drive 50 miles an hour. So in my intellect, I measure out, hey, this thing is benign. I can drive to Atlantic City in the rain and not get wet and get there pretty fast. On the other hand, it's dangerous. If I walk in the street when it's coming down the street, I can get hurt. So that's how it's measured out in intellect. It's not a feeling yet.
Right.
But when I go outside and my kid goes to the curb and he starts to run into the street, now
Then
I have a
then it
feeling
becomes an
to
emotion.
grab the kid back. Why? Because I understand that that thing is dangerous.
Right.
So how they are in the intellect, they're not feelings yet, but just a measuring out into intellect what a proper feeling in response to the thing will be. The emotion, that's called the level of feelings. While the measuring out in the intellect of what should be a proper feeling when encountering something is called the intellectual emotion, the midos of seichel. One expression of how emotions are measured out intellectually is in determining if something is allowed or disallowed in Jewish law. Kosher or treif. Kosher will be the level of kindness, chesed, and treif will be the kindness of gevurah, strict judgment. Kosher, a thing which is allowed, will be an expression of chesed, as determined by the intellect. I have to look into the code of Jewish law to find out if it's allowed or not. The thing that's not allowed is an expression of gevurah, of judgment, as determined by the intellect. Like we see in the Gemara of Beitza, in the case where Rav Kahana and Rav Ashi pointed out an apparent contradiction in Rav's logic. Rav was the teacher, and they were the students. And they said, Rebbe, you just said that an egg that's born to the chicken on Yom Tov is not allowed to be picked up as muktzah. But yesterday you said, I don't know, it was yesterday, earlier you said that a cow that's born to a treif mother is kosher. And the two seems to contradict. Now, even though Rav couldn't answer their logical objection, they had a good question on him, and he couldn't answer it, he still ruled against their opinion. Because his ruling of the law came to him in a way of seeing the truth. He saw the chachma, but he didn't have words and letters to explain it to them. Therefore, even though they had a good question, he stayed on the way that he posed. He said, no, this is the law, even though I can't explain why. Because he had it in the sing of Chachma higher than words and letters, and therefore he couldn't answer their objection. He apprehended the principle on a level higher than explanation and letters of understanding. Not so Rabbi Bar Nachmani, who understood Rav's reason with his power of Bina. Therefore, he was able to give the reason and explanation for Rav's decision. He came and said, this is why Rav paskin this way, Rav holds this way. Why? Because the calf was already a complete animal in the mother's stomach when the lion tore her neck, and she became treif. But it was a complete animal, so when it got born out, it's a kosher animal. However, an egg of a chicken, it's a new birth. And since it's a new birth, it's not allowed to be picked up on Yom Tov.
So I remember this case, Bitzalel.
Yeah,
I was there, you know.
Yeah.
And actually it was a big case. I mean, now they don't talk so much about it anymore. But back then it was like bigger than the O.J. Simpson case. Everybody was talking about it. Oh, how could Rav, he couldn't answer them. He couldn't answer them, and he said, but I'm right. And everybody was stumped and then they had, you know, just like now, they had after that, like, you know, after the State of the Union address, they have all the shmos sit around and discuss it. Well, then it wasn't shmos, there was big guys. Rabbi Bar Nachmani, they said, how could you not understand it? And Rabbi Bar Nachmani said, no, he is right. I'll explain you why he's right. Yeah, I remember. I was there because I used to go to Rav. As a matter of fact, I used to go every Sunday to get dollars, you know, shekels. He used to give shekels and say, Brocha v'atzlocha. Yeah. He was the Rebbe back then, you know.
Yeah, I know. I heard
So
of
we
it.
used to, you know, we used to, obviously we used to go to the Rebbe. I mean,
1 week he wasn't there. So they asked him, why weren't you there? He said, because I had to go to Rebbe for $1. What do you think, these shekels? I went for $1. Now, as we said before, that a reason that's expressed in logical thought, called an explanation, is how the intellect, which is the idea, is dressed into letters of thought and speech, and that's called being understanding. That's why Chokhmah is called an exalted nothing. You know what's a nothing? A nothing ain't anything.
I'm trying to find out. My wife calls me this a lot, but I don't think she means an exalted nothing. I think she means just a regular nothing.
Yeah. Well,
But that's
you're
good too.
enough of a something to get noticed.
I figure
That's where the problem is.
if I'm a nothing, at least I can't get in trouble, you know.
Yeah. So Chokhmah is the level of a nothing compared to Bina, which is a tangible explanation. The Chokhmah is only an intuitive flash. So it's called the nothing. There's nothing to explain. There's no words and letters. Bina, on the other hand, is a tangible explanation, and it's called a yesh. It's called an existence. Why? Because Chokhmah is higher than words and letters. It's an intuitive flash, higher than letters. Therefore, it's not explainable with thoughts of explanation, meaning the real explanation in letters, which will be a tangible something called Bina. But even though, and this is a wisdom, Chokhmah is called nothing because it's an intuitive flash. It itself is considered an existence, not a nothing. Why? Compared to the level that's higher than it. Compared to the level higher than it, which is a real nothing, Chokhmah is called a something.
In other words, so the Bina is like, compared to the Bina, it's like nothing. But compared to above it, which is more nothing, it's something.
It's a klutz. It's a big something. Like it says, Chokhmah comes from the exalted nothing, Chokhmah ma'ayin t'motzi. Therefore, it's an existence. It's a yesh compared to the higher level which produces it, which is not experienced, felt, and grasped at all, not even as intuitive flesh. And that's the higher exalted nothing from which Chokhmah is produced, as we'll explain. So far, we have explained wisdom, which is Chokhmah, and understanding, which is Bina.
So that's 2 out of the 3 intellect, right?
Right. Now, correct. Very good.
See, I remember how to count now.
Chokhmah, Bina, and Das. Wisdom, understanding, and then Das is knowledge. The third part of the intellect is the level called knowledge, Das. Now, knowledge is not the level of pure Chokhmah, the idea, and it's not its explanation, which is Bina. So what is it? It's the bonding and mental unification with the idea, the Chokhmah, and its explanation, the Bina, through concentrating and focusing the mind on the Chokhmah and Bina. So Das is the concentration and the focusing of the mind on the intellectual explanation and its idea. Which, through that focusing, you're able to bond and become unified with the idea.
So in other words, the stronger Das basically makes that the Chokhmah and the Bina are like connecting, basically. Everything's connecting.
Well, you're right. That's going to be how it's going to come out. But right now, what he's saying is that, in other words, even in the Chokhmah, let's say you get to the beautiful building.
Yeah.
If you walk away to buy a hot dog and french fries, you ain't going to be able to explain to somebody else why it's beautiful. You have to connect to the building with focusing the mind on it, and that way you'll be able to measure out the details so that you can explain why
You might not even get the Chokhmah, like if the hot dog stand is this way, and the building is behind me, I'm, hot dog, I can maybe even not see the building in the first place.
even in the first place.
Yeah.
Now, the binding with the intellect through focusing and concentrating the mind on the idea, the Chachma, and its explanation, the Bina, can be illustrated by the example of two students. I wish we had Boris Karshina here.
I know that would be great if we had Boris.
Who are equally smart. Both of the guys.
Wait 1 second. I have something.
Both of these guys are as smart as the other one.
Uh-oh.
Can we get a leitmotif for Marvin?
Yeah. Hey, Lee, play that thing with that Rachmana riff.
So now we have two guys. One is just as smart as the other one. Even though, Marvin, you might not believe the Gimel Aleph is as smart as you.
Oh, nobody's just smarter than me.
And both of them understand the teaching from the Rebbe equally well. But one of them focuses, concentrates on the teaching itself and its explanation. He concentrates his mental strength and energy on this one teaching until during the time he is divorced from all other thoughts and preoccupations. He even forgets his own existence. Now I'll leave it up to you guys to know which one is which. Marvin, have you ever forgotten your own existence?
Oh yeah. I once saw an ice cream that was so delicious for a second there. I forgot my own existence
There you
completely.
go. So you're so concentrated on the thing itself that you didn't feel your own existence.
Oh yeah, ice
So
cream, ice cream,
this
ice cream.
is the level called das, the level called knowledge. The second student, the first guy is concentrating. The second one is not concentrating on the teaching as much until his thoughts can be wandering and he's thinking about more pressing concerns. Therefore, he won't be able to dwell on the teaching at length after the class. They both understood it equally well, but one of them was not concentrating on the explanation. Therefore, after the class, he couldn't really remember what the teacher was saying. But the guy who concentrated on it can dwell on it and remember it for a long time, and that's the power of das, the power of concentration.
Yeah, I still remember that ice cream, see?
Now, the first student can think about this teaching and its understanding for a long time, explaining it clearly. Why? Because of the strength of his bond with the idea and its explanation. And this is called the power of das, to bond with the concept through focusing the mind and concentrating on the idea and its explanation. So you have the idea, which is chachma, and you have the explanation, which is bina, and you have das, which is the concentration and focusing the mind on either the chachma or the bina. Now, the source which allows one to concentrate on the chachma and bina, why is it that you'll be able to concentrate on the chachma and bina? Who cares about it at all? It's just a whole bunch of jumble words. But the source of being able to concentrate is called a hush. A hush, I'm going to translate right now as a natural sensitivity or affinity, an ability or a talent, which will designate at this point as a natural inclination or a thing that he understands. So the idea and its explanation is going to be about an essence that idea and explanation is illustrated. For example, by us, we want God. Right, Marvin?
Well, of course.
Right. So therefore, we're studying this idea about God and its explanation because there's this essential thing that we want. For example, a person who's naturally kind, which means his soul is created to express the attribute of kindness. He's a good guy. He'll always generate a desire for good and kindness. Why? Because the essence of his soul, he's a good guy. Therefore, he's always going to want to do kindness. And the revelation of this desire for doing kindness is higher than the level of Chachma and Bina. Chachma and Bina is only the idea and its explanation of how to accomplish the kindness. But the desire to do the kindness is higher than the Chachma and Bina. The Chachma and Bina is what he's going to use to know how to accomplish this desire he has. But this desire is higher than the Chachma and the Bina altogether. So before there can be an idea of why and how to do a thing, there has to be a desire to want to do it. And that desire is higher than the intellect, higher than Chachma and Bina. The how and the why to do it. Right? The desire to do it is higher than the Chachma and Bina, the how and the why of doing it. And the concentration of the mind on the revealed desire, higher than Chachma and Bina, for a thing is called the chush. That's what the chush is. The concentration of the mind on the desire for a certain thing. And this chush is a mental bond and unification with the desire for a thing. It's higher than Chachma and Bina. And it acts to produce the intellect. That desire actually produces the Chachma and Bina and allows one to concentrate on the intellect, and it allows one to concentrate on the idea and its explanation when it becomes revealed in the brain. And this level of chush, which is focusing and concentrating on the desire for a thing, is the source of the ability of das, which bonds to the Chachma and Bina. How is it you can have a das on the idea and its explanation? Because you're bonded and focused on the essence of the thing that idea and explanation is about. For example, I hear a person playing a piano or a guitar in a very beautiful way, and I decide I would also like to be able to play the piano. If I bond to that desire, if I stay concentrated on that desire, I will produce in my intellect logical reasons why playing the piano is good and how to accomplish getting a piano, how to find a teacher, how to learn how to read music. And not only will I produce this, how to accomplish learning the piano in my mind, I'll be able to concentrate on these ideas to bring them into fruition.
No, Bezalel.
Yeah.
That one's happened to me.
Yeah?
Yeah, I heard somebody playing on somebody's nerves, and I was like, oh, that's beautiful. I'd love to learn how to play that.
So another example is when we learn Chassidus. If I concentrate on the desire to learn, because I have a desire for the thing that learning is about, which is godliness, I will be able to concentrate on the explanations of Chassidus, on the Chachma and Bina, and the Das.
Bezalel, the scroll bar is broken. I can't scroll down anymore. Call technical support. Hello, guys, call technical support.
Well, let me ask you this. How about, can we transcend all this with a nigun?
Oh, of course. That's a great idea.
Your pick later.
Your pick. Yeah.
Nice, thank you. Okay, I guess we're gonna sign off now. Everybody ready?
All right.
God